I'm going to live with my mistress from now on. You take care of my parents, okay?
My husband's sudden declaration sent my mind into a tailspin. What do you mean? I stammered.
It means we're done.
He replied coldly.
Dad, you're going to live with her? I'll come with you.
Exclaimed our son, John, eagerly.
Oh, great idea.
My husband cheered. My heart crumbled as my son, my pillar of support, chose to follow his father.
Serves you right. You thought you were more powerful, but karma has caught up with you.
My husband jeered. I never intended that. I responded quietly, knowing he would never understand the struggles I went through to achieve my dreams. Fine, don't come crying to me later, I said, resigning myself to the situation.
Your whining sounds like a loser's howl to me. Now I won't have to see your face anymore.
He mocked, laughing heartily, his hand on his hip. I watched him, lost in his own mockery, unaware of the expression on our son's face at that moment. My name is Mary, and I recently turned 52, a proud midlifer. I spent years as an aspiring designer, and now run my own company, a dream come true. I met my husband, David, in high school. He was the popular guy, the center of attention. I, on the other hand, preferred to stay low-key, spending my time quietly in the classroom. Our worlds collided during a school festival, where I, in charge of costumes, bonded with him over his outfit for the play. We started dating after he confessed to me just before we graduated. I pursued further studies and became a working professional, while he started working right after high school. He proposed, and we've been together ever since. In our early years of marriage, we were young and financially unprepared, focusing heavily on our careers. By my mid-30s, just when I thought motherhood wasn't in my cards, I discovered I was pregnant with a lively baby boy, whom we named John. Despite our busy lives, we always tried to cherish the moments with our son, but life was more hectic than we ever imagined. While juggling childcare and housework, I decided to pursue a dream I had since my student days, starting my own company. Amidst the daily hustle, I finally launched an online shop, and fortunately, the business has been thriving and stabilizing. However, at home, I couldn't rely on my husband, and every day was a struggle. During such times, my mother-in-law was a great help, but she had a way of making her assistance feel like a burden. She demanded an increase in the monthly financial support for her involvement in child care. In truth, my husband's family was not well off and had been facing financial difficulties since before our son was born. My mother-in-law approached me secretly, asking for help, without letting my husband know, leaving me no choice but to agree. Consequently, I started sending money every month. Initially, my mother-in-law was humble, but gradually her attitude changed. Now, I frequently receive calls demanding money. Even as my son grew up, and our visits to my in-laws decreased, I continued sending substantial amounts. My mother-in-law claimed she couldn't make ends meet, and when I suggested living together, she immediately refused. Thus, I missed the chance to stop the financial support, and before I knew it, 20 years had passed. We had some financial leeway, so I resigned myself to the situation with my in-laws. My husband and I, being high school classmates, used to have fun times with mutual friends. But since I started my company, our conversations dwindled, and his absences from home became frequent. Whenever I questioned him, he would dismissively say,
"It's none of your business."
Amidst this, my son John became my only support. A mama's boy, John had few memories with his father. He always encouraged me, saying,
Mom, you've worked hard today. I made a simple dinner.
Grateful, I replied. I'm always sorry to trouble you. You're a big help. Thank you. John asked,
Is it okay if I study here while you eat?
To which I responded, Of course, I want to spend as much time with you as possible. How about we go out for dinner tomorrow? I'll finish work early. His eyes lit up.
Really? Where shall we go? I'd love some sushi. It's been a while.
I smiled. Great idea. Let's pick a nice sushi restaurant. I suggested inviting his father, but he said,
No need. He doesn't enjoy eating out with family. I'm more than happy with just the two of us.
We giggled and agreed to keep it our little secret. I was thankful for John. Despite the challenges, he grew into a kind and sincere young man without resentment. Perhaps our family issues forced him to mature early. Still, we managed to enjoy calm and happy moments together, which filled my heart with joy. A few weeks later, on a weekend after finishing my overtime work, I returned home to find my husband, unusually, lounging on the sofa, watching TV. It had been a long time since I'd seen him so relaxed in the living room. I greeted him. "I'm home. You've seemed busy lately. Has work calmed down a bit?" His response was nonchalant.
For now, yes. But it's going to get busy again. I won't be home from tomorrow.
I suggested, with a hint of hope. "That sounds tough. But how about we take a trip somewhere, just the three of us, with John? It's important to spend time with him." To my surprise, he replied.
I sometimes grab a meal with John.
I was taken aback. Really? I had no idea. His tone turned sarcastic.
On days when you're late, you're busy even on weekends, huh? Must be tough being the boss.
I explained, trying to keep the peace. "Thanks to you, I could stay home, but I've entrusted a big project to my team. The deadline is close, and everyone's working hard, even on their days off. As their leader, I can't just laze around at home." He scoffed.
Wow, such a wonderful boss. If it were me, I'd be annoyed if my bossy female superior showed up at work.
His words stung. "Is that how it is?" I asked. He bluntly stated.
First of all, I'm annoyed by a woman being in charge. It bothers me.
I opened up. "That's what I've been worried about. Haven't you been colder to me since I started my company?" He didn't mince words.
I don't like it. The idea of a woman being above a man is incomprehensible. Your attitude of looking down on men really irritates me.
"I'm not looking down on anyone. At least in my workplace, there's gender equality, and everyone, including superiors, can have equal dialogue." I countered. He retorted.
I doubt that. Talking with you just makes me feel bad. I'm going to bed.
And left for the bedroom. "David, wait," I called out, but he didn't turn back. David always had a belief that men were superior. His view that women should silently follow men had only intensified over the years. His biased perspective seemed off-putting, regardless of gender. Maybe it's my bias, but all I ever heard from him were complaints about work and his interpersonal relationships. I couldn't recall him mentioning a close friend. The shining image of David from his student days was nowhere to be found. Now, he had transformed into a middle-aged man with a dominant attitude and excessive pride, a far cry from his former self. Exhausted, I lay on the sofa, too tired to even change my clothes. I closed my eyes, and a calm mind gave rise to a troubling question. Despite his dislike for work, my husband David spent his days busily, barely coming home, and seemed to be constantly indulging in drinking parties. This pattern seemed odd, and just as I was pondering over it, our son John returned from his club activities.
"I'm home. Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay?"
He asked, concerned, as he noticed my state. Setting his bag down, he approached me gently. "Welcome back, John. You're always so thoughtful." "I was just resting a bit. I'm fine. How was practice?" I said with a smile.
"Thanks, but make sure you don't overdo it. Mom, rest well, and Dad's back, huh?"
John noted. "Yes, he said he's finally gotten a break, but he'll be busy again and won't be home from tomorrow." I replied. John asked,
"Did he say anything else?"
I answered, "Not really." John seemed to ponder over something for a moment. Seeing his serious, grown-up expression was a bit startling for me, but soon, he returned to his usual demeanor and went to his room to drop off his bag. That night, for the first time in a while, we had dinner as a family. The atmosphere was tense and uncomfortable. In the midst of our silent meal, David suddenly dropped a bombshell.
I've been having an affair. I've decided to live with her.
He said casually. "Wait, are you serious?" I asked in shock.
Yes, I am. I came back today to tell you this. I'll be leaving the house, but I'll leave my parents' care to you.
He declared. "No way. What is this all about?" "It's too convenient. I knew something was off. You said you were busy, but this is also your home. Yet you never return. And despite claiming to have no close colleagues, you're always out drinking. And now, living with your mistress. Don't joke with me. If that's the case, get a divorce first before leaving," I exclaimed in anger.
I'm not getting a divorce.
He stated firmly. "What do you mean?" I asked, bewildered.
It means our marriage is over, but I'm entrusting you with my parents.
He explained. I was dumbfounded by his incomprehensible words and could only respond with a dry laugh. Little did I know, another shock was about to come from John.
"Wow, so you're finally going to live with her. I go with you."
He announced.
That's great. She likes John too.
David responded. "John, what are you saying? Stay with me," I pleaded desperately. But John, looking apologetic, continued with his decision.
Mom, I'm sorry.
John started.
I've actually met Dad's mistress a few times. She turned out to be a nicer person than I thought, and we kind of clicked.
He continued.
I knew Dad would eventually leave the house, and I had decided to go with him when that time came.
I was speechless, feeling as if all the strength had drained from my body. Seeing me like this, David laughed joyously.
Look at you now. You're in this mess because you wanted to overpower me. That's what happens when a woman tries to be above a man.
I never intended that, I muttered, but I knew he would never understand the struggles I went through to achieve my dreams. My fists clenched tighter in frustration. Fine, whatever happens next, don't expect me to care, I said firmly.
What's with that attitude? Sounds like the whining of a loser to me. I'm actually happy to think I won't have to see your face anymore. My life will be so much better.
David mocked, resuming his meal with a smug laugh. His insensitivity, even in such a crisis, was astounding.
Mom, I'm sorry.
John apologized, but I couldn't respond. I left the table without looking at either of them, cleared my half-eaten meal, and walked away. Back in my room, a flood of emotions overcame me, and I spent the whole night crying. The next day, David and John silently packed their things and left for the mistress's place. I didn't bother to see them off. Alone in the large house, I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness, but I couldn't wallow in sadness forever. To change my mood, I started cleaning the house thoroughly. That's when I noticed John's room door was open. Inside, most of his belongings were still there, and a piece of paper lay on his desk. Curious, I stepped in and picked it up. The words written on it were shocking. Reading them, I decided to trust my son once more, and resolved to fight against David, his mistress, and my mother-in-law. About a month later, my mother-in-law called in a fury, demanding money with a voice loud enough to be heard even if I had put the phone aside. I firmly responded, "Mom, I will no longer be sending any money. I'm separated from David. If you need money, ask David and his mistress." Despite her continued yelling, I hung up without hesitation, and eventually had to block her number due to her persistent calls. A few days later, David called, confronting me about the situation.
Hey, my mother contacted me. What's this about stopping the payments?
He demanded. "You might not have known, but I've been sending a substantial amount to your family every month for the last 20 years. I explained. "We're separated with no intention of getting back together, so you'll need to start paying them yourself."
Don't be ridiculous. You were the one who chose to pay, right? I told you to take care of my parents. You should continue paying.
He shouted. "I never agreed to anything. You just assumed and left it all to me." I retorted. "I only started paying because your mother begged me, even though it meant lowering my head to her." David threatened.
I'll divorce you then. Is that what you want?
"That's fine. I'll send the divorce papers today. Just sign and return them," I replied coolly.
You really okay with that? Don't come crying to me later.
He warned. "I won't regret it. I'll take custody of John," I stated firmly.
What are you talking about? John chose to be with me. He's happy and smiling every day. He won't come back to you.
David boasted. "We'll see about that," I replied calmly. David laughed
I can't wait to see you regret this.
and ended the call. After hanging up, I couldn't help but burst into a triumphant pose. I immediately texted John, who replied almost instantly.
I'm coming home today.
I wondered what David was thinking, offering a divorce so readily. Maybe he thought it was his trump card, or perhaps he assumed I would continue supporting his family financially. Either way, his naivety made me laugh. That night, John returned home after a long absence. He looked thin and worn out. "Welcome back, John. What happened to you?" "I've made dinner. Eat as much as you can," I urged.
Mom, I'm sorry for deceiving you.
He apologized. "Don't worry about it. If anything, I should apologize for being so unreliable. Thanks to you, I found the strength to keep going." I expressed my gratitude and hugged him. John weakly returned the embrace. Subsequently, my son John devoured his dinner with an appetite that surprised me, tears streaming down his cheeks.
This is so delicious. It's been a while since I had Mom's cooking. It's just pure happiness.
He exclaimed. I asked him gently, "There's plenty more, so take your time eating. But did you really leave without telling your dad?" John assured me confidently.
Yeah, he won't even care that I'm gone.
Remembering how indifferent David had always been towards John, even treating him as a nuisance, I was perplexed why he was so insistent on custody. His thoughts and motives remained a mystery. But one thing was clear, His past actions towards us were inexcusable. I vowed not to let David or my mother-in-law manipulate us anymore and cherished the precious moments with John. A few days later, the divorce papers I had sent to David were returned with his signature. I promptly completed the necessary procedures at the city hall. The custody was awarded to me without any issues, largely due to John's preference and my favorable living and financial conditions. With this, the ties with my ex-husband and former mother-in-law were irrevocably severed. I returned home feeling liberated and refreshed. When John came back from school, I shared the news of the finalized divorce. He was overjoyed, and we decided to celebrate our new beginning by ordering some exquisite sushi. Relishing the luxurious meal at home, we celebrated the commencement of our new life together. A month had passed since their separation, and as the season of falling leaves arrived, David, my ex-husband, burst into her house, his face red with anger. He stormed in, yelling at the top of his lungs.
Hey Mary, what's this about you getting custody? You haven't sent a dime to my parents. What the heck are you thinking?
Calmly facing his fury, I chose my words carefully. Why are you barging in here and screaming like this? You have no right to be in this house.
But this is my house. It has nothing to do with you. More importantly, I have something to say.
I firmly responded, this house is legally mine. Legally, we're strangers now. Besides, now that we're divorced, I have no financial obligations to your parents. As for custody, it was John's decision. David, unable to hide his rage, raised his voice even more.
What are you talking about? This house is mine. And John initially said he wanted to live with me. Did you threaten him or something?
This house was built in my name. I've paid for the mortgage, living expenses, everything. You haven't contributed a penny. Why don't you talk to John directly? He must have his reasons. Triggered by my words, John, who had been quietly observing from a corner, stepped into the living room.
John, why did you choose to stay with your mom? Did she threaten you?
No, Dad, I always wanted to live with Mom. That's why I went with you in the first place.
Confused yet angry, David retorted.
What are you talking about? That makes no sense. Let's go home.
I'm not going. Dad, did you even look for me once when I suddenly disappeared?
David, visibly shaken, replied.
Of course, I did. I was so worried. I even thought about consulting the police.
You just thought about it, right? You didn't actually do anything. That makes sense, though. Toyu, I was just a source of money.
David, at a loss for words, insisted.
What are you talking about? We're going home now.
Here, this is the diary I kept while I was away. It even has details about you and your affair partner.
David, unable to hide his shock and anger, shouted.
So what about it?
It clearly says here that you took me in because families with minors get government allowances. Once I graduated middle school, I'd be useless to you.
That's nonsense.
David began to sweat in panic and anger.
It's not nonsense. It has detailed accounts of when and where you talked, how you treated me daily.
Using a parent like this, it's despicable.
At that moment, David, in a fit of rage, lunged at John with a raised fist. John was sent flying into the wall by the impact of the punch. Seeing John unable to move from the pain, and David about to attack again, I felt a sense of danger and immediately called the police. But David turned on her, trying to snatch the phone away. I managed to convey their address and names to the police, but after that, only your struggles and David's shouts could be heard. Sensing the urgency over the phone, the police arrived promptly. Upon their arrival, David was taken to the police station. Afterward, me and John explained everything to the remaining officers. The officers checked John's diary and offered words of encouragement to him. After spending a night at the police station, David was temporarily released. However, upon hearing this news, his mother, my former mother-in-law, began to collaborate with him in harassing me, including graffiti on my house walls. I could no longer turn a blind eye to this situation and sought legal advice. I decided to claim damages against my ex-husband, former mother-in-law, and David's mistress. Unfortunately, negotiations stalled, and the matter escalated to a court case. Me and my team had ample evidence, leading to their triumphant victory in court. Later, it was rumored that David and his mistress had split up. After paying the compensation in full, the mistress disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, David, having his affair exposed at work, was fired. He ended up living on the streets, juggling several part-time jobs to get by. David, having lost everything, repeatedly came to my house seeking help, but each time, His outbursts led the neighbors to call the police. After several such incidents, he stopped coming around. As for the former mother-in-law, she completely ignored the compensation payments. I consulted my lawyer, and eventually, they seized the former mother-in-law's assets by force. Among the seized items were numerous expensive brand bags, clothes, and accessories, which covered the full amount of compensation. The former father-in-law, oblivious to the forced remittances, was shocked to learn the truth and divorced the former mother-in-law, kicking her out of the house. Penniless, she managed to find a live-in cleaning job, but her whereabouts after that remained unknown. Me and John, having overcome these issues, are now living a stress-free, comfortable life. Despite the challenges of dealing with these family issues and his exams, John got accepted into his first choice, a well-known local high school, and has started inviting friends over to my house more frequently. My company is thriving, with upcoming media interviews and lectures scheduled at vocational schools and universities. Once things settle down, Mary plans to take a long vacation with John, possibly a trip abroad. Mary deeply appreciates her son's actions, acknowledging that their current happiness is largely thanks to him. I intend to repay my reliable son as much as possible for all the support he has given me.